And I'm going to go ahead and introduce Beth Ponder, who will introduce our special guest. Go ahead, Beth.
Thank you, Anne Marie. I appreciate you getting us started this morning. Welcome, everyone. I so appreciate you being here with us today. This is Beth Ponder at Train PD at TCAL, and we are leading this content standards rollout. I'd like to introduce the rest of our team that's been helping with this, and that would include Anne Marie Molinari and Glenda Rose. They have been just extremely helpful in getting this off the ground. Also, John Stevenson at the state office has been our contact for the content standards rollout, and we appreciate all of his support. We are thrilled to be subcontracting with the American Institutes for Research. It's a national organization that has extensive background in adult education, standards-based instruction, and the idea of rolling out content standards in adult education. Marian Thatcher with AIR is the lead, and she was also our lead trainer last week while we were working with our instructional coaches. So I'm going to pass it to Marian, and she's going to kind of take you through what we've done with the coaches, what's the information that they got last week, and then what are their assignments moving forward. So please welcome Marian Thatcher.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Beth, and thank you to all of you for being here. I know that some of you were at the training in Austin last week. I recognize a few of your names, so nice to see you again. And as Beth said, I'm just going to try to give you a flavor of what your coaches that you sent to that training learned last week and what their assignment is and what they're planning to do with your support and help going forward. So here's what the project looks like so far. If I can go, oh, there we go. So these are the stages of implementation. This is from the Sustaining Standards-Based Education in Adult Education handbook from OCTAE. And these are the stages that they put forward, and then you'll see how our Texas plan is lined up with that. So the first stage is creating readiness and getting people on board, understanding what the standards are, getting familiar with them. And that's kind of the stage that we're in right now and that we were addressing last week. And then as your coaches come back to the program and work with other teachers, we'll be building kind of a critical mass of people in the field that understand what the standards are and the importance of implementing them. And moving from there to institutionalization, there'll be some policy decisions that mean that the standards will be implemented in a way that's sustainable. And then finally, scaling up so that, with the goal of getting 100% of teachers and staff on board with the new standards. So this is what it looks like matched up with your project that we're doing in Texas. So the phase 1, understanding the content standards. Phase 2, we're just starting now, soon, planning for instruction. Phase 3, planning for implementation and sustainability. And then that will be in February, and then after that, your coaches will be doing more work individually with teachers, observing in implementation and in coordination with you, of course. So here's where we are, what's happened so far, and what's coming. You attended the rollout meeting on April 19th, and you selected coaches for each of your programs to participate in this year-long project. We had a webinar for the coaches on July 28th, and we gave them assignment to watch a video and reflect about it, and they brought their reflection sheet to the training. Then we had 2 days of training last week in Austin, which was fabulous. I have to say, you have an amazing group of teachers. They were so engaged and so committed to what we were doing. It was a pleasure to work with them. So they have an assignment now, which I'm going to show you in a minute, and we'll be following up with them in a webinar in September 22nd. So they have some time to implement and to get with you and make sure that you're on the same page as far as what they're planning to do. Then the next face-to-face event will be regional trainings in November, and the next slide I'll show you is where and when those are. So we'll have another pre-webinar for those events in late October, and then the one-day trainings, and then we'll have a webinar for you after those are over, just as we're doing for after the first training was over, to just update you on what your coaches learned and what they're planning for the next phase. Then our next one-day meeting will be at the Taylor Conference, one of those days, February 1 to 3. And then we'll have another webinar for you, and then we'll have wrap-up webinars, one follow-up and then 3 more wrap-up webinars over April and May through till May 31st, where we're just following up with the coaches, checking in regarding how things are going, and doing some problem solving if needed. So here's what the training looks like in November, the training dates. These are currently scheduled. They're tentative. It kind of depends on how many people register for each location. So we might end up having two trainings in Houston and instead of one of the other ones, but that remains to be seen. These are the dates that we're putting out now and planning on. Okay, so let me give you a little flavor of what your coaches did last week with us. The emphasis was on unpacking the standards, and unpacking means just doing a really close reading, determining what students need to know and be able to do to meet the demands of the standard. So it's easy to look at a standard and go, oh yeah, I'm doing that, or oh yeah, I'm kind of close to that. But if you really look at what are the skills, what are the concepts, and what is the context of what the standard's asking for, it helps you get a better understanding of what that will really look like in instruction, and how will you know if your students are meeting that standard. So we talked a lot about that. What's the point of having standards? Determining the demand on the students of what each standard is, and that the standards are going to help teachers focus on the key content and skills. So you know what you're teaching, you know what your goals are for each term or semester, and you know if you're getting there or not. That's the goal of having standards. And then professional development will be focused on what's in the standards so that we're all on the same page as far as what we're teaching in each content area and at each level. What they were looking for in the standards was the skills, the concepts, and the context. And so I'll just show you what that looks like in an activity. So here's an example of a standard from math, sub-area financial literacy. So the skills are usually the verbs, so those are circled, develop and use. The concepts that the students are developing and using are an economic way of thinking and problem solving. And then this one has a lot of context because those can be used as an employee, a consumer, a provider, and an investor. Some standards don't have any context. Some have a lot of context. Some are just straightforward, use division to solve problems. So there's not a context there, but this one has a lot of context. Under each standard are a number of benchmarks, and sometimes it makes more sense to unpack the benchmark. So this is an example of a benchmark, benchmark 7, that was under that one, and this one focuses on simple interest and compound interest. So you can see the skills, calculate and compare, the concepts, simple interest and compound interest. And the context is where you're going to use those if you're thinking about saving or borrowing or taking out a line of credit. So we did a lot of that. We did that in English language arts, in math, and in ESL because I know we want these coaches, they're coming from their own program or content area, but we want them to be comfortable working with the teachers from any content area. And they were definitely up for that. You may see this form because they may be doing this with the teachers that they're going to be coaching. So not to go through it with you in detail, but just so this is where you take a content area, a sub-area, a standard, a benchmark, and this is what would look like if you unpack that benchmark. And then over here on the bottom right is where is sample classroom activities, and that's where we'll be going. That's kind of the direction for November, is really getting into, now that we know what the standards are, we're comfortable, we can find the standards for things that we're doing in the classroom or we're observing in the classroom. Then what is the ideal approach to bringing students up to the standards, increasing the rigor of our instruction, which is one of the big goals. So this is the form that you might see that they're using. They've practiced with this form many times, as those of you who were there can attest. And then in addition to that, we watched some videos of classroom activities and reflected on how they did or didn't match the standards. And that would be in preparation for visiting a teacher or talking with a teacher about her classroom lesson, and starting where they are, starting where everyone is. In other words, not starting saying, here's the standard and you're not teaching to that standard, but just starting where each teacher is, what are the goals, identifying a standard to work towards, and then developing activities that match that. We also read scenarios, and we also created some classroom activities and shared them. And some of those will be posted on the PD portal and the community of practice. And then finally, we talked about instructional coaching. What is that really? What is that going to look like? And so now their assignment now is, and I'll show you in a minute, is to start with working with one or more teachers, and they'll be reporting back on the webinar on September 22nd. And I know some of the teachers that were going back were like, give me your slides right now because I'm training my teachers next week, or we have our back to school meeting next week. So some of you probably are already hearing about this and familiar with this, and others are still just formulating their plan. So it will be important to talk with your coaches about what the plan is for bringing the rest of the teachers on board. In November, we'll learn more about lesson planning, and so with some focus on matching curriculum to standards. And then January to May will be more about the coaching process and broadening that and bringing more teachers into the process of implementing standards-based instruction. So this is the definition we had of instructional coaching, and we emphasize that these coaches are partners with the teachers that they're working with. In other words, there's no supervisory role, there's no evaluative role. It's two people or two or more people getting together, focusing on standards and student goals, and working to figure out what are the best high-impact teaching strategies to use in each situation to teach to that standard. So those coaches will be explaining, modeling, and modifying teaching approaches and working with their fellow teachers to do that as well. This is the assignment that they have for September 22nd. It starts with identifying a teacher or teachers to work with. There's no number specified. I know there's some very large programs, some very small programs, and everything in between. So that'll be up to you and your coach how many teachers they're going to work with. We hope that they will meet at least twice with the teacher that they're coaching. The first time to sort of give them the overview and the model unpacking that we did in the training, and the second time to choose a standard, develop a lesson objective and a classroom activity, and then for the teacher or possibly both of them to implement that activity and then have a chance to talk to each other and debrief about how it went. And we're hoping that we're asking them to post in the COP some of the activities that they implemented, which standards they chose, and the outcomes that they saw from the process. These are some of the principles of instructional coaching. The first one is establishing clear coaching goals and defining participant roles and responsibilities. And the other ones I think I talked about, that it's important it's not evaluative, and that it's important that they're working with you closely so that you're in support of what they're doing. You know what they're doing, first of all, and you're supporting that and guiding that to whatever extent you need to. And then they need to have a way to evaluate just their process, not evaluate the teacher, but evaluate, okay, we were going to teach to this standard. How did it go? Did we make it? How will we know if our students learned this or not? So some kind of formative assessment. We'll be talking about that a little bit in November as well. So as far as establishing clear goals and defining the roles of participants, they did have in one of their handouts a sample coaching agreement. They don't have to use this. They can use this. It was just a way to think about, just to have a concrete agreement about what they're doing together. So they, excuse me, they might say they're going to meet weekly. That would be awesome, but probably unlikely. Bi-weekly, monthly, bi-monthly, or on this date and this date, or between this date and this date, whatever works. So they have this as a Word document. They can modify this however they want. And then when we just put some other things in there that they might want to include, like sharing their work on the PD portal, agreeing to use standards, choosing an initial standard, possibly doing lesson plans and lesson activities together and observing each other or being observed. Sometimes I know that's not possible, but that would be the ideal, but that depends on also developing a relationship and trust before you get to that point. And then some concept about how we're going to evaluate how our work together went. So that's something that they could possibly use. They don't have to, but I just wanted you to be aware of that and that they have that so that you can have input on that if you want to. And I had them write down on it, don't use this until after Thursday, next Thursday, which is today, so that you could see this first in case you want to have input on that. So the first thing they're going to do is recruit or choose the teachers they're going to work with. The next thing they're going to do is find the right starting point. In other words, starting wherever that teacher is, not starting where we want them to be, but wherever they are right now. How are the standards going to address a problem or a challenge that they're having right now so that it's the answer to something that they're dealing with, hopefully. Then building that relationship and connection, encouraging implementation, collaboration, modeling good instruction. That'll be up to the coaches how they choose to do that, but that'll be important. And then providing feedback and supporting teachers and partnering with you, their administrator. So this is that's my overview of what your coaches did last week. I know you have a report or an alignment document due with your second quarter report, and that's going to be related to how do our courses match with the standards now? What are we doing already? Where are the gaps? Maybe we don't have financial literacy, or maybe we don't have computer skills, or whatever it might be, and how could we address that gap? And there'll be a template for that and examples, sample forms forthcoming. And I don't know if John wants to address that right now, or if you have any questions, go ahead and put them in the chat.
Can you hear me?
Yes, there you are.
Yeah, I'm here. Thank you, Marion. This has been a great summary of the very rigorous two-day training we had. There was some confusion and misunderstanding about what we're expecting on this Q2 report, and what we're planning to do. Well, we're trying to clear some of this up now. What this report is basically a gap analysis where you will look at the content standards, compare it to your materials, and see where the needs are in your program. We're not asking for full implementation by December. We're not asking for complete lesson plans or syllabi by December. but it is a report that will take some time and will certainly involve the instructional coaches because they're becoming the experts on content standards, but I think it will be doable. We are in the process of developing a template to help you along with that and some examples. We'll be sending that out as soon as we've vetted it, and hopefully it will give you enough guidance to complete that report. I don't know if Anson is on the line. He said that he was going to try to call in. He may have some comments as well. Are you there, Anson? Well, not this time, I guess.
So does that mean we explained everything so well that there's not one single question? There we go. Where can you get copies of the standards? Those who were at the training received copies, and it is available in PDF. So it is possible for them to work with it without a printed copy if you can't print it.
But electronic versions of the standards are downloadable through in a number of places on the TWC Adult Education homepage and in the PD portal under the teachers support, what used to be called the Literacy Institute, now the Instructors Resources page.
Right, teachers have the digital option, and we had some good suggestions during the training of how to search in the PDF if you're just looking for teaching fractions, just search for fractions and every standard related to fractions comes up. So there's some advantages to using the digital copy. And also we had one teacher, I think from Austin Community College, that created a spreadsheet with all the standards in a way that will formulate syllabi and lesson plans in all program areas, and that's posted in the COP on the PD portal.
Marion, we also have two more questions that have come into the chat pod. The first one is, where are the slides from the training posted, which includes the timeline? That's the first question. So let's answer.
Okay, so the everything is posted in the COP in that standards rollout, what do you call that, discussion area? And everything's there. The slides, the handouts, the slides broken down into sections from each day. So everything was posted there on Monday. So you should be able to find everything there.
That is going to be the Content Standards Community of Practice, which is in the PD portal. That is what what Marion is referring to. And then we also have another question that, and it's from, let me see if I can find it. Do all teachers need to have a copy eventually when we implement the standards? And I would have, Marion, go ahead.
Do you want me to answer that? Do all teachers need to have a copy of the standards? Eventually, you're going to have course outlines and a syllabus for each course that list the standards that are going to be addressed, and presumably every teacher will have that for the courses that they're teaching. So I don't know that they necessarily have to have a copy of the full document. They need to know what standards they're responsible for in their course. and every teacher isn't going to be working on that, so probably you don't have to make a copy for every teacher.
Glenda Rose has put in the chat pod the link to the digital version of the standard. So right now, that is an option for the teacher. So I'll go ahead and send it out again. But Glenda Rose was gracious enough to send out the link to the content standard. So it's available right now in digital form.
And Monica, just thinking about your question, what you're really looking for is the timeline. And there was a handout from the coaches webinar on July 28th that had, one of the handouts was about the timeline. So you might want to look for that. That's also on the Community of Practice on the PD portal. Right. Beth's posting about the lesson planner document in the Community of Practice. That's the one that that automates the process of creating lesson plans and course syllabi. So that's definitely something to look at. Somebody did a lot of work putting every one of those standards and benchmarks into that spreadsheet and making Excel sing and dance with them. So it's worth a look. Aaron at Austin Community College, right. Thank you, Aaron. Other questions, thoughts, concerns? Well, I think that's what we have for today. I'm happy to stay on and see if there's any other questions. But Beth and John, is there anything else that we need to cover?
I did not have anything else. John, if you're good, then I think we'll go ahead and close the webinar for today. Thank you all for participating, and please continue to let us know if you have questions or issues. Feel free to email me at any time, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.
Okay, thank you, Beth. I am good with everything, and I'm going to thank all the directors for participating in this. This is starting to get exciting, so I think we're going to be able to move the needle on this. So thanks again, and go forth and align.
Thank you, John. And Monica, there was the link in the COP to the webinar was not working, but I think it is working now. So I think if you try now, you'll get it.
Thank you so much, Marion.
Absolutely.